Hi, I'm DJ Ware, and this is the CyberGizmo. Today we're going to be looking at Distrobox. This is my first video since my computer was destroyed and the after effects of a tornado. So what we want to do today is we want to look at Distrobox, and for some time, a lot of you have been asking me just that. And so it's been on my list for, almost a year. I had a lot of things I wanted to do as far as videos, and at the same time, I didn't feel that Distrobox felt finished to me. There was a couple of things in it that I was kind of concerned about security-wise that they have fixed. So I'm ready to look at it now. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at the functions which are new. So if you're looking at a video of Distrobox a year old, you're not going to see these particular options in it because they weren't available a year ago. In fact, they weren't even available on the last release. So these are all current. And the ones that have recently added, I think are absolutely critical to running a container-based system on Linux. So let's take a look at Distrobox and see what it does and some of its use cases, how it works. Yeah, I probably will just combine the demo in as we're talking about it because, you need to do this yourself and learn how the container works, how the commands work. You can kind of follow along if you want, but I'm going to be doing this under Asahi because I want it to run on ARM on Fedora. So yeah, that's what I want to do. And then I'm just gonna tell you up front, I'm gonna do another video on this. There is a distribution from OpenSUSE that was formerly called Aeon, I believe is how you pronounce that. It's now just called MicroOS. So it is a MicroOS kernel for Linux, and it is heavily dependent upon Distrobox. It is an immutable distribution, and Distrobox operates in the same way as Toolbox does for Fedora, Silverblue. Yeah, all of the immutable ones use Toolbox. Well, you can put Toolbox on anything. So the first thing is when we're considering to use a container or a virtual machine, that question isn't, well, Distrobox replaces a VM, right? No, you shouldn't be thinking about like that. Virtual machines have a very specific use case that they are intended to be used in. Containers will not work in those environments very well. The same is true of virtual machines. You cannot, there are certain applications that don't perform well in virtualization. They work better in containers. So you have to look at the application you're installing. Where does it need to go? That's the thing you need to determine. Is it better to run it under a VM or is it better to run it in a container? It isn't either or. We generally use both today. We still do. But with that in mind, let's dive in. Let's take a look. So who would use this? Well, I think any Linux user who's looking for the freedom to explore different distributions without the hassles of dual booting or dealing with complex virtual machine setups. And so we're going to unlock this a little bit. I'm going to do more unlocking of it in the next video when we look at it actually running under a distribution that is meant to host it. And there are some things that are pretty cool about Aeon. In this video, we'll look at, probably won't be as deep as I wanted to go because I'm going to save that for OpenSUSE. But what we'll do is we'll talk about how Distrobox is a command line utility. Now, yes, there are third-party packages that you can download and install that give you more or less a Distrobox GUI interface, but you should realize that it is the intention of the Distrobox developers to put this under Copilot, which is the same thing that Red Hat and Fedora use. But it's present on every distribution that I've encountered. So that's their intention, is the GUI will be Copilot, which I don't care what they use as long as that we get a GUI for it. That would be nice. So, but that allows you to, Distrobox allows you to run any Linux distribution that they have in their repos. Now you can run Distrobox either on Docker or on Podman. I kind of experimented with Docker a little bit, and then I noticed that the core system of Distrobox was still using Podman. So I was like, why am I doing this twice? This is dumb. So yeah, my recommendation is just run it under Podman, unless you just hate Podman and you want to run it under Docker, which I guess is fine. I mean, you're just going to have a little extra. You're going to have a little bit more running on your box than I will. What is the idea behind containers anyway? Where did they come from? So containers were built to solve a problem called WOM. What the hell is WOM? WOM is works on my machine, and we used to get that all the time from developers. They would build up the app, they would get it running. This would be in a traditional environment like a workstation, and then they would post it to the whatever system we were using to manage version controls. They would post it to that. We would pull it into the test environment, try to get it installed. It would fail. It would not work, or there would be some bug that would crop up or a missing dependency. And then we go back to the developer and say, what's up? It's not working. And, well, it must be something you did because it works on my machine. Yeah, we used to hear that all the time. And yeah, sometimes it was our fault. Sometimes it was their fault. But so the reason behind containers was to get away from all that. It was meant to package up an application so that all of the dependencies came with it. I set it down, I ran it, done. I didn't have to worry about the famous, well, it worked on my machine because it was his machine or her machine that we were running. So yeah, problem solved, pretty much. So that's the reason behind why containers exist. That's their main purpose. So I think you can think of Distrobox as like having a portable, self-contained Linux environment that seamlessly integrates with your host machine. So if I want to run Fedora, it runs under Distrobox, even though I might be running this under Debian or Arch. So yeah, or vice versa. Maybe I want to run all three of them. Maybe I want Ubuntu and Debian and Fedora and Arch all in the same machine, but I don't want them interacting with each other because, yeah, if they do that, we could have a huge mess of dependency crossover. So yeah, we don't want that. That's a tough one to have to untangle. So this means you can enjoy the benefits of different distros without sacrificing its stability or performance of your main operating system. Distrobox achieves this by leveraging containerization. They use Podman or Docker, and we kind of talked about that a little bit, but Distrobox simply goes beyond just simply creating and managing containers. It's more than that. It actually sets up a user-friendly environment that feels like you're working with the native installation of whatever distribution you're using, including if it's graphical or not. So you can run a server version, you can run a graphical version. So this is more like running under WSL under Windows. So one of the Distrobox's standard features is its remarkable integration with the host system. Your home directories, for example, are automatically mounted within the Distrobox container. That allows you to exit files effortlessly. It also mounts a number of system directories as well. By default, it will mount your sysfs. It'll mount your dev. You know, the thing is, this is where my concern was, is anytime you have a path like that back to the host machine, you're in trouble. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. So I like the ability to ratchet it down. Now, you're giving up something, right? You're giving up that feature of I can plug a USB device into the host OS, and it just carries over into the Distrobox. Same with a graphics card. I can plug a graphics card in, and it carries over, except for NVIDIA. If you have a AMD or an Intel graphics card, fine, it'll carry through automatically. But if you have NVIDIA, they have a special command because NVIDIA, of course, is special. And so they have to be handled in a special way. One of Distrobox's standard features is this remarkable integration. So similarly, hardware devices, we talked about that. They just come over. The level of integration eliminates friction that's associated with virtual machines, like going in and modifying your IMU map, or having to have the graphics card dedicated 100% to the virtual machine. Well, you don't have to dedicate your graphics card 100% to the container because it's running under the host. So yeah, your applications that are running in the container can share right alongside your, except for NVIDIA, of course, because they have this special thing they have to do because they're special. But anyway, if you have a real graphics card, no, I'm just kidding. So if you have a graphics card that is actually built into the kernel, you don't have these problems. So why is Distrobox such a game changer? So first and foremost, I think it offers unparalleled flexibility. I mean, from a single command, you can create, manage, and switch between multiple Distroboxes, each of which can be running in a different distribution. That means you can have Ubuntu for development, Fedora on a server, Arch Linux if you need cutting edge software. If you're doing pen testing, you might have tools and packages set up for that, or you might be running a pen testing distribution. So it's like having a buffet of Linux flavors at your fingertips. No more of this Linux shuffle. I have to have a dual boot, or I have to have a VM in order to run my applications, and then I have to suffer the penalties of performance under the VM or under the other types of container managers. So another compelling advantage, of course, for containers is isolation. I mean, after all, that is their real design, was to isolate the packages that they have from your host, and they do that very well. But there's more to isolation than just that. So each Distrobox operates in its own isolated container, meaning that there are controlled interfaces for them to talk to each other. So you can install or configure so any software you install or any configurations you make on one Distrobox, they won't interfere with your host. Unless, there's a way you could do it if you're sticking them in your home directory, your configurations in the home directory, and then guess what? They get shared by all of them. So there is ways that you can share, and maybe unintentional ways that you can share too, so watch out for that. So, but the isolation, I think, is crucial for maintaining a clean and stable computing environment. Also, it's also important to maintain levels of risk that are acceptable, right? So unlike virtual machines, which require a pretty significant amount of resources to run, because you basically have a full copy of the operating system that you have installed with that VM. So the Distrobox containers are incredibly efficient. The other thing you get from it, free of charge, is because it's using your host OS. If your host OS is running a modern version of the Linux kernel, because maybe you have devices that you need to be supported, then your containers gain access to those drivers as well. By the same token, if your host OS is behind and you need a driver that guest OS doesn't have, you may have to upgrade the kernel first before, you can do that. That minimizes overhead, maximizes performance, but it also has a downside, and we'll talk about those. But the other thing is you can pick up your entire container, copy it over to another machine, plop it down, and it's running the same as it was. So even though that host OS you're installing on could be different. Now, it's possible, again, that the kernel may get in your way. So you would want to be, if you're going to be doing that a lot, you're going to want to have a baseline operating system for your host OSs so that they conform to the same versions. So that you're not running into problems with stability that way. The disadvantages are any software isn't perfect. If it were, we would write our software once and we'd be done. We would never need to touch it again. So there's no such thing. There's always ups and downs with any software. So what are the disadvantages of Distrobox? Distrobox has a user-friendly interface. even though it's command line, it's pretty simple. There's also ample documentation to help you get through it. Now, one thing I noticed though is if you go to the Arch Wiki and that's where you start. Now, for me, this may not be true of you. It was like, all right, I got dropped in the middle of the story and I'm missing the front piece of it. It's good. I mean, the Arch Wiki is fine if you have that level of knowledge going in. So I would start with the documentation that's in Distrobox first on their website before moving over and looking at the Arch Wiki, because the Arch Wiki kind of picks up from there and carries it forward. So yeah, you need to have the baseline before you move over. I don't know, maybe they'll fix that at some point. In some cases, for when you get into extremely demanding tasks that are consuming all of your hardware, like your CPU, your memory, your GPU, and you're really hitting your system hard out of the container, you might see slight performance differences compared to running that on a native hardware only environment. But it's only at that point where you do that, and that's because there is software that manages the container, and as your systems get busier, that software gets less chance to run, because the priority, remember, is to run the app, not the app that's maintaining it. So yeah, things might slow down a little bit until the load kind of slacks off. If you start seeing that happen, it may be time to split or load balance, your container. For the most everyday tasks, the performance impact is going to be negligible. So that's the only two things I can think of. Maybe you guys have some other things that you want to share in the comments below that you've encountered. So what about use cases expanding beyond this? What is it really that you would consider using this for? Well, obviously, if you're a developer, this makes sense. I've talked about this before when I was covering Fedora Silverblue. When you look at Toolbox, that's exactly how it's designed, is that because my home directory is part of the Toolbox, and the same is also true of Distrobox, any changes I make are stored in my home directory. They get backed up with my home directory. That means also that they can be used either in the base OS or in another distro, because they're all sharing that same event. However, you better be careful what you're doing, because be careful if you're storing configurations for the app that differ between the different container distributions that you are running under them. You could blow one of them out of the water accidentally. So if you want to experiment, and that's what I do, I experiment and I break things in the process of doing that. I experiment with configurations. I experiment with different libraries and different packages that may help me in my day-to-day environment. Plus, and maybe I come across something I want to share with you. So yeah, I mean, or you want to run something cutting edge. Just to try it out, even though it may be in beta or even in an alpha state. Well, you're definitely asking for a risk to your base OS if you're installing it directly on the hardware, right, without a container. So with Distrobox, you can safely test all those new additions without risking the stability of your home system. And if something goes wrong, you can always delete the Distrobox and start afresh. So Distrobox can sort of be a time machine. It allows you to resurrect even some of your old apps that maybe you've got running. And if you're a gamer, maybe that offers you some advantages, because your game environments may have, some of them may be built on earlier versions of Linux and have requirements for older versions of libraries. And so, you play that game today under Windows, especially if you have games that were written for Windows XP that you want to run. You've got to figure out how to get them horseshoed into that environment to run without destroying OS environment. So Distrobox can even be used to run games from other distributions because of the ability to run other distributions inside the Distrobox. Is that of interest to you? I'm not a gamer. Is that something that you guys find useful, or is it just something that, you'd rather not do that because you've run into so many problems with it? I don't know. I'm not. That's not a thing I do. My game is my the game I play is break the operating system and then fix it. Distrobox can be used for a wider range of tasks, from setting up specialized environments. Maybe you have one for pen testing. Maybe you have another one for a specific set of applications that may not be available in your standard distro repositories. So, but you need those, and there's quite a few of those that you'll run into from time to time. Maybe you're pulling something out of the AUR. Maybe you're pulling something out of Arch that you need in order to run on your system, but maybe for some reason or another, you just don't want to have a full Arch setup to do that. You just want it for this one thing. One of the other things that's kind of cool is that if you do have graphical applications, there are commands you can run inside of Distrobox to actually set up the icon and the launcher outside in your host OS. So you can launch your Firefox, or you can launch your favorite editors or whatever those might be. Now, I have run into times where it didn't work, and it's because there was dependencies missing in the distro box, so to run that application. So make sure your application is running there first before you do that. Otherwise you'll be chasing your tail like I was. So let's take a closer look at some of the advanced features of Distrobox. Distrobox is set up so that applications running inside the Distrobox can see applications on your host. And that's also true vice versa, that you can also set it up so that host applications can see the applications running inside your Distrobox. So I think that's particularly useful for developers who need to test their applications in a network environment before they deploy to a test environment where you're doing integration testing, for example. So, and if you're a power user, I think you'll find that all of the customization options you have, and this is not like Docker where there's just a few things you can change. There's a raft of stuff you can change with this. So yeah, you can fine tune the container's resources. You can adjust your network settings. You can even modify the underlying container image to meet whatever needs you have. I can't think of any other container tool that does that. That's a lot of control that you have over a container. Distrobox is more than just a tool. It's more than just a container manager. You'll find a wealth of resources out there. I have seen, you have documentation from Distrobox. You have tutorials from other third-party sites. A lot of people, there's tons of people talking about this. There's lots of videos on it, although be careful. Some of them are old, and you're looking at versions of Distrobox that do not have the current set of commands. Now, the old ones are still there, but the new ones are not, obviously, because they weren't in there yet. The other thing that you'll find is that you'll find question and answers, SourceForge being one, and maybe also Reddit. You can get answers there if you ask your question in a vague enough manner that no one goes and flips out on you. Like they have a tendency to do there. You'll find, So I think my conclusion is, I think this is a game changer for Linux. I think it's going to do two things. One, it's going to hasten the development of immutable systems coming from others. I know Ubuntu is planning. I think they had planned to actually have one for 2404, but I don't think they got to it. But they're working on it, and there's others that are working on immutable systems too. That's the future. I think that is definitely the future. And I think the other thing is that it's going to encourage people to explore more about how the internals of Linux works, because they're not afraid that they might break something and not be able to recover from it. You don't have that issue as long as you take the steps to either snapshot it, or if you don't care about that Distrobox is just an experimental place, just blow it away and recreate it. So if you're a developer, a system administrator, a gamer, or maybe you're just curious, that's fine. You can use this. So I think it has a wide range of possibilities. So I want to thank my Patreons and channel members. Thank you for being patient, and also thank you for providing the means for me to get this other machine back up and this new machine up and running in part, and get back going again. So that helped a lot, and I do appreciate that from all of you. So with that, I hope to see you in the next video, and bye for now. Oh, please like and subscribe.